There's an interesting survey that came out last week from the American Enterprises Survey Center on American Life. The survey was on the state of American friendships, and it found that 15% of Americans have ended a friendship over politics. Breaking this down further, 10% of conservatives say they have ended a friendship over politics, while 28% of liberals said the same. And when you get to extreme conservatives, 22% said they have ended friendships over politics, while a whopping 45% of extreme liberals said the same. So while cancel culture may not be a partisan phenomenon, it seems that it may be more likely on the left than it is on the right. With me now to talk about these findings and this survey, how it fits with what we're seeing in cancel culture, is Meg Kilgannon, FRC's Senior Fellow for Education Studies. Meg, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much, Joseph. It's great to be here.
Well, there's a lot in here that I want to unpack with you, and I'm going to let you play shrink a little bit today, because I think that's really what we're trying to understand is how Americans are thinking about things. But, you know, there's layers to this study and what it tells us. And one of the first things that it tells us, the foundation of this, is simply how often Americans talk about politics. And it says that only 21% of Americans discuss politics or government with friends a few times a week. Now, that to me is a shockingly small number in light of the world that you and I live in and what we do on a daily basis. The idea that only 21% of Americans are having consistent conversations about this stuff makes me realize that we're weird. But does that mean that the rest of America doesn't care, or do they not have, shall we say, a safe space in which to discuss these things?
Well, that's an interesting point. I had not considered that question, but I think it's a healthy one to ask. It's interesting to me as the person who's doing education here that one of the places that you see cancel culture, that sort of power exercised so freely, is on campuses and in schools. And the idea that you would interrupt a relationship with someone over politics is really remarkable, especially when you consider what you just said, that most people aren't even talking about politics most of the time, unlike us.
Right. And I think another detail of this, and I'll dig one level deeper, 55% of Americans say that they discuss politics fewer than a few times a month. So more than half of Americans say that it's not even a couple times a month they're discussing politics. So that's basically never. Now, my research hypothesis would be, and I don't believe this study got to that, but my guess would be that college campuses are very different than the American public. But is it a problem that most Americans simply aren't discussing politics, or is that actually healthy? Are those people happier than we are?
Well, they're probably happier or less frustrated than we might be sometimes. But I think that when you live in a country where you are free, where your rights are guaranteed by a document like our U.S. Constitution, that really is a wonderful, wonderful security that allows people now to not really think about politics, to not really think about their rights and freedoms, because they enjoy them. They don't even realize they're enjoying them, maybe in some cases. They're taken for granted. And so it's probably a sign that basically we're doing a good job in the United States of having of preserving our freedoms, that so few people discuss them. But it does lead me to worry that maybe makes our freedoms at risk if we take them too much for granted.
I think that's a really good point. I sometimes think of it in terms of civic maintenance, in the same way that you have to take care of your home, you have to mow your lawn, you have to fix the plumbing when a leak happens. And if you don't, and if you lose the ability to recognize when problems have developed, and you have a diminishing number of people who are capable of fixing problems when they arise, I think that is a concerning sign for the future. And I do think perhaps that if these conversations are not happening, does that mean we have fewer people who will be capable of engaging on any serious level and capable of solving problems when they do arise? Because they do arise.
They do arise, and judging by the state of affairs in Congress, I don't really want to comment on the capability of addressing problems. Your conversation with Congressman Biggs was quite revealing, right? He wants to talk about how much spending we're doing, for example, is just one example of a problem that's there. He's not having a lot of luck getting anybody else to discuss it. So this is an unfortunate state of affairs. We do need to practice. That was one of the things about the survey that I thought about after reading it was, are we just not practicing having difficult conversations with people? Are we not? Is the breakdown of the family contributing to this in some way? Is the fact that people maybe aren't coming from that safety of a loving nuclear family where, sometimes your worst critics are in your family, and it's often your family who can point out to you the challenges that you face in your personality or in your habits that challenge you to do better, right? That's why God puts us in the families we're in. And so could it be that the fact that people aren't quite, our nation, there's a high divorce rate, children come from broken homes, maybe their parents were never married to each other. Is that contributing to this phenomenon that we're not having unsafe, so to speak, conversations with people? Are we too much on our guard because of that? I'm not sure, but it's something to wonder about.
I think that's a fair point. We do value psychological safety highly now, and that's a modern phenomenon, it seems. But rigorous intellectual conversations, critical thinking in which people ask critical questions and make propositions and critique other propositions, that's kind of the enemy of psychological safety. And I think perhaps, especially on college campuses where psychological safety may be valued most highly, these conversations are kind of the enemy of psychological safety. And so people aren't having them because we are perhaps afraid of asking questions, of being critical, right, because it's seen as intolerant and judgmental. But right, another aspect of this study, because these political conversations have to take place in the context of friendships and people that you care about. And who are we friends with? I think this is also revealing. 53% of Republicans, according to the study, say they have at least some friends who are Democrats. But only 32% of Democrats say they have at least some friends who are Republicans. Why do you think that matters?
Well, that really was an interesting part of this study. That it was remarkable. I think that it matters that people can be friends with someone and recognize the humanity in people, regardless of their political views, right? Regardless of their religious views, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their life choices, right? We can see the humanity in every person. And to the degree that that is compromised by, situations in our culture like Roe v. Wade and different factors that have caused us to devalue human life in America and around the world, I think that may be part of the answer to this. Another thing I thought about was that I think that other studies have shown that Republicans tend to be more likely to be churchgoers than Democrats. And so when you're active in a faith community, you are in relationship with people. You have a circle of engagements with people with whom you can be friends. I've also seen studies about friendship that indicate that when your children if you're a married couple and you have children, when your children go to school, you tend to make friends where your children are in school based on the activities that your children do. And sometimes those relationships last longer, but sometimes they only last the length of, say, the travel baseball season or the soccer season, or whenever you're actively engaging those people and seeing them at a specific time on a regular basis, which is what we do at church.
Right.
We see people at a specific time on a regular basis, and that contributes to building relationships. It's a practice of a habit, right? Like practicing the conversations you talked about earlier.
Yeah, we have seen other evidence when it comes to voting maps and voting patterns that there are more bubbles on the left than there are on the right. The blue parts of our countries, and which is often inner cities, are a deeper blue than the red parts of the country, where in the bluest parts of America, there are people who genuinely have no neighbors who disagree with them. They all vote for the same person. It's much harder to find those places where in Republican precincts, for example, where there was no one there who would vote for the Democrat. So there are bubbles that exist that are more red, or that are more blue than red. But there's another component here. Not only the friendships that we already have, it's the willingness to lose friendships, to end friendships. 20% of Democrats have said they have ended a friendship over politics. 10% of Republicans say they have ended a friendship over politics. So it's bipartisan, to be sure, but it seems to be more likely on the left than the right. What do you think that tells us about cancel culture?
I think it is. It's something that is very much practiced by the left. And we see that in terms of the cancellations on social media that happen by the executives in Silicon Valley. That is a very, very, very single-minded kind of place. I don't think they even realize that that people don't necessarily have pronouns in their bios everywhere in the world. They're just completely unaware in some ways. And so when you have only one kind of thinking, that is going to be very stunting in terms of being able to form relationships with people. We see that also, unfortunately, in the educational world, where we have one kind of thinking, progressive thinking, that is informing education schools. It's informing the sensibilities of everyone in the educational industrial complex. And I think that actually is why you'll see in a red place on the voter map, it's not quite as bright red as the blue places are, because those educational infrastructure locations are staffed and run by people who are voting blue. So that's going to impact the level of red there.
That's a good point. When it comes to cancel culture on universities in particular, a North Korean defector who attended Columbia University has recently gotten some attention for speaking out against wokeism on college campuses. And she was on Sean Hannity's show this week, and this is what she had to say.
It's just heartbreaking. I literally sold as a sexual slave, and I literally crossed the Gobi Desert to be free. And now I thought I landed in a country where I can say what I believed and have my, freedom to think. However, now I end up in a country, I have to constantly censoring my speech, because now in the name of a safe place, Colombia was told us what we cannot talk about.
Yeah.
And I am so concerned, like, if America is not free, I think there's no place else is left that is free. And I think that's why it's really alarming to me.
So what she says there is that the pursuit of safe spaces and psychological safety is creating the same result as the North Korean dictators.
Right. And while she has America to come to from North Korea, where do Americans go when they find themselves on the other side of a safe space, or when they are deemed an unsafe person or having unsafe thoughts in a quote unquote safe space? I really was taken by her remarks. I'm very, very grateful that she spoke up. Thank God she was able to get out of North Korea. And it is incredible the sacrifices that people across the world will make to get to our country, the greatest, best hope for freedom in the world. This is the greatest country in the world precisely because of our Constitution and the Bill of Rights that guarantees our freedom of worship, our freedom of speech. These are universal values that every human being cherishes. And unfortunately, many countries do not guarantee those rights. We know that we have them because they come from God, right? And other countries depend on the state to dole out rights to their subjects. And that's not the way it is in this country. That's why she wants to be here. And the fact that she is witnessing this on a university campus is really, really disturbing. And the other thing that I thought about was that she chose to come here, and people on the campuses are choosing to be in that environment, and they are actively suppressing and canceling students and limiting engagement. I hear so often from students when they're taking classes that are overly political, they say, well, I know I'm going to have to write in support of these ideas if I want to get a good grade in this class. Yeah. So there's a level of self-censorship happening that doesn't allow for debate, because debate is not safe, right? In the safe place.
That's exactly right.
Which is just a really remarkable state of affairs.
Meg, not only are they choosing to be there, they're paying a lot of money. And in many cases, they're going to be paying a lot of money for decades to come because of the student debt that's being accumulated in order to get there. It really is incredible. And I do hope that a growing awareness of how dangerous this is developing in our consciousness, so we can solve this. Meg Kilgannon, thank you so much for spending the time to be with us today. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Joseph. Great to be here.